Hey, welcome to another edition of Kyle Meredith with. It's the interview series presented by WFPK at WFPK.org, Consequence, and the Consequence Podcast Network. Thanks as always for making your way here. Checking out the series. Of course, if you like what you see, what you hear, hit that subscribe button. I put out 3 new interviews every single week, so it's a great way to keep up with your favorite artists. Now that we got the business aside, today's a very sad day. This is a special bonus upload because today we heard that the legendary, the iconic Jane Birkin has passed away at 76. At the time of me doing this recording, the cause of death hadn't been revealed, but it just reminded me of the great conversation that I was fortunate enough to have back in 2021. That we recorded. She just put out an album of original songs called "Oh Sorry You Were Sleeping," that we got to talk about. That's the English translation of the French title. But we got to talk about how that record came to be and how it stemmed from a musical, a theatrical version of the same name that she had done. We talked about writing about ghosts and family and Serge Gainsbourg, and it was just such an honor to get to spend some time with her that day. So I wanted to include that full interview here for the first time as we remember the great Jane Birkin.
Hello, hello, hello.
First, I got to say how amazing it is to meet you. Thank you so much for doing this. Congratulations on just this beautiful new record. I know I'm going to have to use the English translation. I don't want to murder the original title here of "Oh Sorry You Were Sleeping." It's beautiful. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I guess we'll get the backstory on this a little bit because like the title especially, like this starts with a theatrical play that you did years ago, right?
Yeah, I wrote it first of all as a film, and it came out with Jacques Perrin and Christine Boisson, and then I did it again as a play a couple of years after. And the film I directed myself and I'd written it. It was just the same as the play was. And then Etienne Dao came once or twice, maybe 3 times. And he said that he thought the text would be a good record, a sort of one-person musical. And so I thought that was a funny idea. And why not? And I was secretly flattered that he should think that the text was worth anything. And then he used to pop me the question every so often, and he wasn't free or I wasn't free because I was doing arabesque or I was doing Serge with the Philharmonique, or I don't know, there were things that happened, or then my daughter died and I didn't do anything for quite a long time. And so it was never the right moment. And then after having done the Philharmonic for nearly 2, 3, maybe 3, 4 years, I got my agent to find out from Etienne if he was still interested. This was 20 years later. And he said he was. So I whizzed round to his house with 2 texts that I'd written about my daughter, one which was called Cigarette and one about the cemetery. And for me, it wasn't really possible to do a subject that was about all sorts of things, jealousy and what all the rest of the record is about, but without talking about her, because she died 7 years ago, and it was the most dramatic thing that had ever happened, of course, to me. So we started with those 2, and he'd done all the music in advance. So he played me a music that was a bit like Kurt Weill, and he put the words of Cigarette on that, and it sounded quite shocking, but at the same time, I thought, well, perhaps that's exactly what it should be and how it should come out. You can hardly put a sentimental music onto those words. And when we'd done those 2, we went back to the children in the cemetery when they were playing Jeux Interdits, and we got going on "Oh Pardon-tu dormais," and he'd cut out everything that he thought had been vaguely interesting, everything in the play. And then he got unhappy when there were a few things we couldn't fit into songs, and he made one up, which was "Je voulais être une telle perfection pour toi." That was just using bits that had nothing to do with each other and making a song with them. So he's been quite extraordinary, because I never would have done it or even found it that it would interest anyone to do it, had it not been for Etienne.
Yeah, it's also interesting because, you know, any one of these things could have made for a full concept album, and for you to be taking, you know, from so many different sources to make this one complete statement and have it work together so well. You know, as I listened through it, of course, you mentioned your daughter. You mentioned the cemetery, and there is the track called Ghosts, and I do find that they're sort of peppered all throughout the record. I mean, not everywhere, of course, but you do find little ghosts, and I would start to wonder, you know, as I was first listening to it, you know, you know, are these ghosts metaphorical in the sense that they're memories or something like that, or are we really thinking of more of a gothic substance, you know, a real true?
Well, maybe more of a gothic substance. I always thought that I wish that they would be made into cartoons like Gustave Doré illustrations, and have you whizzing out the window on bats' wings of a bit like what was it? Something on a cold mountain that was a bit out of Fantasia, when you saw all those fumes coming out, and then for you to be on their wings. So a sort of Peter Pan going back home. In fact, the last song, which is Catch Me If You Can, is also going home. It's also the thing of going back to where you're safe, childhood probably.
Yeah, it's also picturesque, cinematic in a way. You know, when I listen to this, I had to kind of check myself a little bit, because a lot of times when I hear French music, I do think of cinema. Like, to me, it all sounds so cinematic. Not all of it, you know, there's so many different styles, but so much of it does. What you do, I started wondering, like, is that something I'm imposing on it, or is that something that naturally comes with French music, where it just sounds like every single song is its own movie?
This particular record seemed to me very, very like a movie. I mean, when there was one which was Marée Haute, the orchestrations of the whole thing were so extraordinary that I felt as if, you know, that you were on the boat, Christina, you know, the orchestrations were so divine that Jean-Louis Perrault did. So they were like little movies. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Did you work on it? You know, so they're writing the music and everything, and you've written the words. How much do you work on the melody yourself? Because the melodies are amazing all throughout this record.
None at all. None at all. And what's more, I was ill for a lot of the time. So he recorded a lot of the things, and it was a surprise when I came back. The little boys singing I'd always wanted, of course, but the violins, the beautiful orchestrations, the bagpipes. I rather wanted the bagpipes. So there were a few ideas. Oh, I don't even know that I had the ideas. I don't think so. I think they were all his. And when the French said, but doesn't it sound a bit like Serge Gainsbourg? He said that he purposely tried not for it to sound like Serge Gainsbourg, because it's already quite daunting for them to follow nearly sort of 40 years or 50 years of me singing Serge's songs. So of course they didn't try and do an imitation of Serge in any way. And Etienne said, if anything, that they'd been influenced by John Barry's music, which was movie music. So that's how I realized what had touched them, by the instruments even. And then, of course, because it's me singing, then people think of Serge, because we're sort of linked together so strongly.
Yeah, and I know that's something that you've. Of course, you continue. The last tour was kind of built around the Serge's songs. But what was I reading that during this lockdown pandemic that you would be calling random strangers and reading Serge poetry to them?
Yes, good fun.
Yeah, what was that experience?
Well, it's a theater in the Théâtre de la Colline, and I know the man, Wajdi Mouawad, who's a very good director. And he had the idea that he'd ask actors, if they would like to ring these phone numbers, and they'd sort of, I suppose, read poems to people, which of course we didn't know. And I couldn't think of any poems where I was really very at ease. I mean, yes, a few American poets maybe, but I was ill at ease with French poetry. I didn't feel I was going to do it very well. So I did Serge's lyrics. So when I used to ring up and do Quoi de notre amour feu resterait que des cendres, people were rather pleased. it takes 10 minutes out of a really boring day for them and for me.
But what a special connection right there. I mean, and and for you, I mean, carrying on, the legacy of his words, obviously, your own legacy, with your art and your work, and now your own words. I mean, I'll go back and compliment you on the poetry on this record. I mean, obviously, some of it I had to look up and translate, but you do have 2 English songs on here,
Yes.
and that's is that a first? Because that's not
Yes.
something you've regularly done. Why those in
No.
English?
Well, I suppose because the music made me think of ghosts, and because they were my ghosts for the beginning, grandmothers, grandfathers, they all were English. So daughters, nephews, they were English. And then cats and dogs, of course, and husbands and friends have been a bit of a mixture, but it was sort of normal that it would be English. And perhaps there's a tendency that is English, or perhaps it's my family, perhaps it's my grandfather who was a clergyman. I don't know, that he used to put different heads on different animals, stuffed animals, and underneath he used to write, "Such are the marvels of the good Lord." So he was a very funny man called Poppy Russell. He was an eccentric English clergyman. So perhaps there's a tendency of finding all that rather enchanting in a way, that seemed normal for ghosts. I wouldn't have written it in French. And "Catch Me If You Can" was really, Kate had written on a little piece of paper that she'd stuck onto her diary as happy like Ulysses between his parents. And I thought, what's that? What does she mean? What did she mean? I mean, when people die, you look for clues. And so I suddenly thought, well, perhaps that's where everybody wants to go back, to be as happy as Ulysses, to be safe again, really. So as the music there again went dun 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 dun, it was a sort of falling music. He'd asked me to write an epitaph, Etienne, and sent me off to Brest, but I was unable to write an epitaph. But there was a sort of mixture between Kate and me. And then the last time I'd seen her by the piano after a show I'd done, there'd been a party, so there were lots of people around her. And I always remember thinking, what were last people's images of her? Did they have the same impression as I did? Because then, supposing we've all stayed in the same positions, like grandma's footsteps, like that, and she's just walked through and up the stairs and off the roof, and so it was like a movie again. It was a very easy to see sort of thing, and then it took over itself. As I've heard, it happens to people with songs, and it's true with "Catch Me If You Can." I was writing it, and suddenly it caught up with me. Directly, I looked up about Ulysses, and something magical happens, and you're taken away. And so, ghosts and that one. Those are the only ones in English, no?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are the only 2. Yeah, right there.
And then "Oh, pardon, tu dormais" was really the dialogue from the movie. Mm-hmm. I mean, it gets a bit more violent in the film or in the play because as he doesn't answer any of the questions that she's hoping for answers, which is sort of fatal because no one wants to reply what you want to hear at 3-4 in the morning. So in the end, in the play, she realizes that she provokes him, saying that it would be better if he left, that it would be better if he went to this other room. So she says, "What, you have a room?" So it does exist, a room and a key and a staircase, and then she's so hysterical that she's so frightening to look at, and she asks him whether he'll always see her that way. What can she do? What death will she have to get rid of that awful image he has of her? And all these little bits Etienne put together. Par quelle mort, he put that in Marie Haute. Nothing was wasted.
Yeah, no, it absolutely wasn't, at least to my ears. And again, I'll keep paying you compliments as often as I can on this because it's such a lovely album. But It's also been written about. It is a personal record. You bring up, your daughter Kate and her passing, and to make something like that musical. I mean, do you have to separate yourself in any way to get to that spot?
It doesn't really matter. I mean, it doesn't do much. It's not as painful as it seems. When I wrote it, it was because I'd come back from I think we were in Lyon, and I'd gone into a pharmacy, and then there was a little kit for manicuring your toenails, and a sweet little set, and that set me off because I remembered her feet and how delicate it was, and how she used to take care of those beautiful white feet. And I got back to the hotel in a terrible state, and Philippe Le Richaume was there, my artistic director for years and years, and he just said, write it all down. So I went up to my bedroom. I didn't have any paper. I wrote it on the back of my diary, and that was it. Ma fille s'est foutue en l'air. I wrote it down like that. So when I went round to Etienne's, I just showed him that. And it was sort of mixed up between that and the cemetery. We're all intertwined. And he helped me untwine it. And then he didn't quite know how to. He suggested this music for cigarettes. And then he said, I didn't answer him for about 3 days. And they got worried that I'd been hurt, or I don't know, that I hadn't liked it, and not at all. I thought that it was just the right way of doing it. I was probably shocked, and it's not something that I listen back to, not that particular song, only that song. I jump over it, not because it's painful, just because it makes me feel ill at ease.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can imagine with that. You're you have two other daughters. We're big fans of Charlotte's, her music here. I'm in Louisville, radio station WFBK. We play a lot of Charlotte too. Do you all talk about your albums when you're making records?
No, we're all so secret. I know Charlotte's writing an album now, and she wants to play something to me before she goes off to Los Angeles to record it. So I'll have that good fortune. But they said nothing about this record, neither of them.
I guess that's interesting to me because, again, it is such a personal testament from you that, I'd wondered if it would be in a family conversation in any way.
In no way, no one even approached the subject of Christmas to such a degree that I thought, oh my God. But Lou said that it was punk, which was when I played it to her. And that was months ago, because I played it to them first, of course, even before the orchestrations were put on. And Charlotte was very moved with the graveyard one. And they've never talked about it again. So I haven't brought it up either. I just saw it climbing up the charts and was it was just a secret then.
It's interesting.
But I mean, I go off to see. I saw a couple of Charlotte's movies. Funnily enough, one on the other night, there was nothing on television very much, so I went on to Netflix, and no, not even onto another channel that I'd never seen before. Perhaps it was Canal Plus. Anyhow, I suddenly saw her with that extraordinary, beautiful face when she was in The Golden Door, which was about Italian immigrants arriving in America. And so I wrote off a texto to her because she was so stunning and with red hair. And then I remember being on the set with her when she was doing it in South America, in Buenos Aires. And then I put on a Martin Scorsese film yesterday that was about an incredible woman called Fran
Lebowitz.
Yeah. And what do I see but a bit of Charlotte again, and Serge burning a bit of the 100 franc note. And so I wrote off to Charlotte and to Lou in my excitement, and they'd both seen it. So I said, oh, thanks. I mean, it was such a funny film to see, what's more, and such an extraordinary character that I knew they'd like it very much. And Lou, being a bookworm, really, like her, I knew how much she spends her life in Shakespeare and Company in Paris. And so she's very, very literary. And she writes her own stuff too. So perhaps we don't get too involved in talking about that. We talk about our private lives and the misery of this and that. and jokes and laughs and children, but we don't talk about what we do.
We all make such amazing arts. I mean, to be a fan, to be able to get some of this stuff, I know I'm really lucky. We're all really lucky about what you all do. And for this record as well, I'll keep coming back to that. Do you plan on touring it when that's possible? Is that in the cards?
The idea is that we're going to set up some sort of residence, it's called, which is rather nice, to rehearse for a few weeks in January, March, in April, and then be on tour in May. I hope that'll be possible. I'm not feeling very good right now. Perhaps I'll be in hospital by then.
Oh,
I
no.
don't know. But
No,
maybe it'll be all right by then. I mean, we've had such luck in it coming out before Christmas. They were going to put it off until February, and I thought, how do we keep everybody interested? I mean, I'd already done interviews and covers of things, so what do we do? We will be fed up with the thing. And then, no, a bit of luck, just before Christmas, we were able to come out. So maybe we'll be lucky again.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. I would love to hear how these songs kind of come to life in those live ways too. I'll be looking forward to kind of checking that out. And Jane, it's such a beautiful record. It's such an amazing piece that you've put out here. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk about it today.
No, thank you. Thank you very much.
It's certainly been a pleasure.
Boosted my day. Thank you.
And thanks to my guest. Also, thanks to you for checking out the episode in the series. Before you get out of here, hit that subscribe button. Again, you get 3 brand new interviews every single week. New one every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at right here on YouTube, or of course anywhere in podcast land, including iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, NPR, or WFPK.org as well. A great way to keep up with your favorite artists and discover new ones as well. Then after that, actually head over to WFPK.org. That's where I do a show Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern. It's an hour full of song premieres, music news, anniversary spins, bonus interviews, Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern at WFPK.org. Consequence has your music and film news. You can also find me on the social media spots, Facebook, Instagram, mostly on Twitter. All 3 of them, the address is at Kyle Meredith. Do hope you like and follow along. That does it for another edition. I'm Kyle Meredith. I'll see you next time.